The light within the locus of Concord was a symphony of dying suns. It was not a metaphor. It was a literal, agonizing truth. Beams of energy, drawn from the home stars of every species in the Galactic Compact, converged at the heart of the chamber, weaving a tapestry of shimmering, holographic data. For millennia, this light had been a symbol of unity, of shared life and enduring power. Now it was a testament to their shared decay. The light from the Kelshan sector was gone. The radiant blue of the Auridian home world had flickered and vanished cycles ago. And now, the golden hue of the Valois system was fading, its brilliant glow dimming to a sickly, jaundiced amber before the assembled speakers. The silence in the locus was a physical weight, a pressure born from the vacuum where hope used to be. Kalen of the Cathar felt the silence in his crystalline structure, a low, resonant vibration that threatened to introduce fractures into his ancient form. As speaker for a people who measured their history in geological time, he was accustomed to patience, to the slow, deliberate turning of cosmic events. But this was different. This was not the graceful aging of the universe. It was a sickness, a voracious, creeping blight that consumed light and life with an unnatural swiftness. He stood upon his designated dais, a faceted column of living obsidian, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the panicked, desperate faces of 100 other speakers. Some were biological, their soft forms betraying their agitation through trembling limbs and shallow breathing. Others were energy beings, their forms wavering with psychic distress. And then there were those like General Vorlag of the Xylos, whose chitinous exoskeleton remained impassive, betraying nothing of the strategic calculations no doubt racing through his hive mind. "The reports are unchanged," Vorlag's voice echoed through the chamber, a series of sharp, percussive clicks translated into the universal lingo of the compact. "The fade is accelerating. The Valois star will be extinguished within one rotation. Their evacuation fleet is insufficient. Their world will be left to freeze in darkness." The general's projection, a towering insectoid warrior, gestured with a bladed forelimb toward the dimming Valois light. "Our fleets have been unable to slow the phenomenon. Our most powerful energy shields have dissipated before it. Our most advanced scientific minds have failed to comprehend it. We are watching a civilization die, and we are doing nothing." A murmur rippled through the assembled speakers. It was a sound Kalen had come to dread, the sound of 1,000 ancient cultures realizing their collective impotence. "We have done all that we can, General," countered a fluidic being from the Cygnus arm, its voice a gentle cascade of synthesized chimes. "We have shared energy, resources, and our brightest intellects. The nature of the blight is beyond our current understanding. It does not conform to the known laws of physics." "Laws are descriptions, not limitations," Vorlag retorted, the sound sharp with contempt. "We have grown complacent, content to observe the universe from this gilded cage while our capabilities atrophy. We have debated and philosophized while our strength has withered. We sent out the Concord's universal plea for aid, a call to every known intelligence, every signatory of our ancient pact. We have laid our desperation bare for the cosmos to see." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "And the cosmos remains silent. The elder races are too withdrawn, too preoccupied with their own transcendent paths. The younger races are too primitive, too weak. The call was sent. No one is coming." The finality in his tone was like a shroud descending upon the locus. Kalen saw it in the drooping antennae of the Lepidian delegates, in the darkening corona of the Solipsi energy forms. The great Galactic Compact, a bastion of peace and cooperation for eons, was being brought to its knees by an enemy it could not fight, see, or comprehend. They were an alliance of the most powerful and intelligent species in the galaxy, and they were utterly helpless. They had believed themselves the pinnacle of evolution, the masters of their own destiny. They had thought their combined knowledge was a fortress against the dark, but the darkness was here, and the fortress was made of sand. And they thought no one would come. The phrase echoed in Kalen's own mind, a bitter refrain. It was the truth. They had broadcast their plight on every known frequency, even resorting to primitive radio waves and psionic cries, a desperate galaxy-spanning admission of failure. They had offered knowledge, technology, even territorial concessions to any who could offer a solution. The silence that followed was the most profound answer of all. The universe was vast and indifferent, and in their moment of greatest need, they were alone. "There is one signatory who has yet to respond," a quiet voice spoke, barely a whisper in the vast chamber. It was the delegate from a minor world near the galactic rim, a small, furred creature whose people were known more for their poetry than their politics. All eyes, physical and holographic, turned to the tiny being. The species designated humanity from the Sol system. A wave of dismissal, almost of scorn, washed through the locus. General Vorlag let out a harsh chittering sound that was the Xylo's equivalent of a laugh. Humanity, the primitives from that high-gravity death world, the ones who only achieved unified governance a few of their short centuries ago. Their signal of ascension was so chaotic, so filled with their own internal broadcasts of conflict, that we almost classified them as a presentient plague. They are signatories nonetheless, the small delegate insisted, shrinking under the collective gaze. They were granted probationary status. The plea was sent to them as it was to all. What would you have them do? Vorlag challenged, his projection striding toward the center of the locus. Send us their chemically propelled rockets, offer us their crude fission weapons. Their entire civilization is confined to a single system. They have no meaningful interstellar capability. Their understanding of stellar physics is rudimentary. They are infants, Kalen, loud, quarrelsome infants who have barely learned to walk. To expect aid from them is to expect a hatchling to slay a stardrake. Kalen remained silent, his gaze fixed on the faint, steady mote of white light that represented the Sol system in the grand galactic map. Vorlag was not wrong in his assessment of humanity's technological standing, at least according to the Compact's last survey. The humans were an anomaly, a species that had achieved sentience and technology with breathtaking, violent speed, only to spend millennia mired in self-destructive conflict. They were a paradox of brilliance and brutality. Their art and philosophy, what little had been translated, spoke of a profound capacity for empathy and sacrifice, yet their history was a litany of unending war. They were a species that dreamed of stars while systematically poisoning their own cradle. The Compact had decided to observe them from a distance, to let them mature or self-destruct as their nature dictated. To offer them membership now seemed like a desperate, foolish gesture. And yet Kalen remembered the initial contact report. The human probe that had crossed into compact space was, by galactic standards, an antique. It was propelled by ion engines and powered by decaying radioisotopes. But the plaque it carried, a simple etching of their form and the location of their world, conveyed a message of astonishing, audacious hope. It was a message in a bottle thrown into a cosmic ocean, sent with no expectation of an answer, purely on the faith that someone, somewhere, might find it. It spoke of a loneliness, a yearning for connection that resonated with the Cathar's own deep history. The general is correct in his assessment of their technology, Kalen finally spoke, his voice a low, resonant hum that commanded attention. The chamber fell silent once more. By our metrics, they are a young race. They have not mastered gravitic engineering, nor have they stabilized wormholes for transit. Their energy production is, by our standards, inefficient and dangerous. He paused, letting his multifaceted eyes sweep across the chamber. But we measure races by their tools. We have always been a council of engineers, scientists, and warriors. Perhaps we have used the wrong metrics. What other metric is there, speaker? Vorlag boomed. Power is power. The ability to manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe is the only true measure of a civilization's worth. The humans can barely manipulate their own planet. There is resilience, Kalen replied, his voice calm and even. The humans evolved on a world that is, by galactic norms, exceptionally hostile. High gravity, a volatile atmosphere, extreme axial tilt causing severe seasons, and a star prone to violent outbursts. Their world is a crucible. Most species in this chamber evolved on garden worlds, planets of exceptional stability and calm. We were nurtured by the cosmos. They were forged in fire. They have survived planetary self-annihilation multiple times by their own hands. They have endured plagues, famines, and ice ages. They have looked into the abyss of their own extinction, and time and again, they have pulled themselves back from the brink. He turned his gaze back to the fading light of Valois. We are facing an abyss of our own. We, who have known nothing but growth and stability for eons, are now confronted with a force we cannot overcome. We are reacting with fear, with despair. We have forgotten how to struggle. The humans have never known anything else. Perhaps their answer, if it comes, will not be one of technology, but of spirit. Vorlag scoffed again, a dismissive flick of an antenna. Spirit does not reignite a dying sun, Speaker Kalen. Your philosophies are a comfort for the dying, not a strategy for the living. The humans will not respond, and if they do, it will be with a message of useless sympathy. They are irrelevant. We must focus on what can be done. A strategic retreat, the quarantine of the affected sectors. We must be prepared to sacrifice the few to save the many. The cold pragmatism of the Xylo's general sent a chill through the locus. He was speaking of abandoning billions of Valois to their fate, of cordoning off a quarter of the galaxy as if it were a diseased limb to be amputated. This was the logic of the compact now, not unity but survival, not compassion but calculation. Kalen felt a deep weariness settle into his crystalline matrix. Vorlag was right. It was the only logical course of action left to them. The hope he had offered was a phantom, a poet's dream in a world of cold physics. He had spoken of human resilience, but resilience could not stop the stars from going out. The plea had been sent. The silence was their answer. No one was coming to save the Valois. No one was coming to save any of them. The session devolved into grim logistical planning. Evacuation corridors, resource reallocation for refugees, the establishment of a galactic quarantine zone. Each word spoken was an admission of defeat, a nail in the coffin of the compact's founding ideals. Kalen watched, a silent, sorrowful observer, as the grand alliance he had served his entire long life began to fracture, to turn inward, prioritizing self-preservation over the collective good. The symphony of light in the chamber seemed to dim further, not from the fade, but from a failure of will. It was in the midst of a heated debate over the placement of the quarantine line that the alert sounded. It was not a klaxon or a siren. Those were for military engagements. This was a single, pure, resonant tone that cut through every argument, every whisper, every private thought. It was the tone of a priority one communication, a signal from a source outside the established network, broadcast with such power and clarity that it superseded all other traffic. A message from an unknown, or in this case, an unsanctioned source. A technician's voice, a reedy, nervous synth tone from a Vodran specialist, echoed in the sudden, tense silence. "Hi, speaker, we are receiving a transmission. It is originating from the Sol system." A collective intake of breath, a rustle of movement, a flicker of 1,000 holographic forms. All eyes turned to the central data stream, where the faint white light of Sol was now pulsing with a steady, rhythmic cadence. General Vorlag's mandibles clicked in annoyance. "A message of condolence, as I predicted. Put it on screen. Let us hear their platitudes so we may return to the business of survival." The central dais shimmered, and the chaotic swirl of galactic data coalesced into a single, stable image. It was not the face of a human, as they had expected. It was a simple, stark symbol, a dark blue circle, and within it, a smaller, pale green and white sphere. Below it, text began to scroll, translated into the compact's lingua with flawless, instantaneous precision. The message was not addressed to the High Speaker or the Council or any formal body. It was addressed to the citizens of the Valois system. The message was brief, devoid of preamble or apology for its directness. It read, "Hold on, we are coming." The silence that followed was of a different quality than before. It was not the silence of despair, but of profound, absolute bewilderment. Vorlag was the first to break it, his voice tight with disbelief. "What is this? A jest? A pathetic attempt at posturing from a primitive race? We are coming? How? In their chemical rockets, it would take them 10,000 of their years to reach the Valois system. The transmission, it is not coming from their planet," the Vodran technician stammered, his synthesized voice filled with awe. "It is coming from the edge of their system, from the region they call the Uit Cloud. The energy signature of the transmission is, it is impossible. It is greater than the output of our own central beacons." Before anyone could process this information, another alert sounded, this one from the Locus's own deep space sensor arrays. A new report flashed across the main screen, overriding the human message. It was a gravitic displacement warning. Massive, impossibly massive, disturbances were being detected on the very edge of the Sol system. Not the subtle, predictable ripples of a ship entering hyperspace or traversing a wormhole, but something else entirely. It was as if a section of space itself was being folded. "What is that?" the Cygnus delegate chimed, its fluidic form rippling with agitation. "What are those readings?" Vorlag leaned forward, his multifaceted eyes narrow. Wing as he analyzed the data. "They are not readings, they are errors, malfunctions. The gravitational distortions are off the scale. No known drive system could produce such an effect. It must be a sensor ghost, an echo of the blight phenomenon." But Kalen knew it was not an error. He could feel it, a subtle tremor in the fabric of the locus itself, a resonance that was not of their technology. He looked at the white light of Sol on the galactic map. It was no longer a single point. It was dividing, splitting into multiple distinct points of light that were moving away from their star with an impossible velocity. They were not accelerating, they were simply there at the edge of the system, and then they were gone. leaving behind a wake of tortured spacetime that would take centuries to settle. "They have left their system," the Vodran technician whispered, his voice trembling. "Multiple objects. The scale is it cannot be correct. The mass of each object is registering as planetary. No larger. They are the size of small moons." The locus was thrown into chaos. Speakers shouted over one another, demanding explanations, running frantic diagnostics. Planetary mass objects could not move like that. They could not simply vanish from a system. It violated every known principle of physics. General Vorlag slammed a fist against his dais. "A trick! A deception! The humans are broadcasting false sensor data to sow confusion. It is a pathetic power play from a species that has nothing else to offer." But Kalen did not believe it was a trick. He remembered the simple, audacious hope of that ancient probe. He remembered his own words. They were a species forged in fire, a people who had stared into the abyss. He looked at the stark, simple message still displayed on the screen. "Hold on, we are coming." It was not a plea or a promise. It was a statement of fact, a declaration of intent delivered with a calm, unshakable certainty that was more unnerving than any threat. He turned to the frantic assembly. "Silence!" His voice boomed, the resonant hum of his Cathar physiology amplified by the locus's acoustics. The chamber fell quiet, startled by his uncharacteristic force. "We have spent cycles lamenting our own impotence. We have mourned and we have debated and we have accepted our defeat. A signatory of this compact, however young, has just stated they are coming to the aid of a fellow member. Our duty is not to question their methods, but to observe. To clear a path and to be ready." His gaze fell upon General Vorlag, whose chitinous form was rigid with skepticism and fury. "General," Kalen said, his voice softening but losing none of its authority, "direct our long-range observatories toward the Valois system. Whatever is coming, we will see it arrive. And then we will know the truth of humanity." The wait was an agony unlike any Kalen had ever known. The Valois star continued to fade, its light now a pathetic, flickering candle in the cosmic dark. The reports from the system were a litany of despair. Atmospheric freezing, power grids failing, the planetary ecosystem collapsing. The Valois people, a species of elegant, avian creatures, were huddled in geothermal shelters, their songs of mourning echoing across their dying world. The compact could do nothing but watch, their vast fleets holding a silent, helpless vigil at the edge of the system, respecting the quarantine line that had now become a funeral shroud. They had all come to believe Vorlag's assessment. The human message had been a cruel hoax, or perhaps the final, insane broadcast of a species driven to madness by their own insignificance. The locus of Concord was a chamber of ghosts, its speakers waiting for the inevitable announcement that the Valois light had been extinguished forever. Then it happened, not with a flash of light or the thunderous arrival of a fleet warping into reality. It began with silence. The frantic, desperate communications from the Valois homeworld simply stopped. The compact's monitoring stations reported a sudden, complete communications blackout from the entire inner system. The Blight sensors went haywire, reporting a null reading as if the phenomenon itself had vanished. But the star was still dim, still dying. "Report," Vorlag's voice cracked across the locus. "What is happening?" We do not know, General," the sensor technician replied, his voice strained. "All our sensors are being dampened. There is a field of some kind enveloping the Valois system. It is not energy, not gravitic, not psionic. It is nothing, a zone of absolute nullity. We cannot see past it." A profound, primal fear gripped the chamber. Had the Blight evolved? Had it created a dead zone to hide its final, terrible work? For what felt like an eternity, the greatest minds of the galaxy could do nothing but stare at a blank spot on their view screens, a patch of darkness where a star system should be. And then, through nullity came a light, a single soft silver beam that pierced the darkness. It was not the harsh glare of a weapon or a drive plume. It was a gentle, focused radiance like a surgeon's tool, and it was aimed directly at the dying Valois sun. The compact's instruments, even at this extreme range, registered an impossible phenomenon. The star's decay was not just halting, it was reversing. Energy, vast and incomprehensible, was being poured back into the stellar core. The sickly amber light began to brighten, to shift back toward its healthy, golden hue. The star was being rekindled. A gasp, a collective sound of utter disbelief, echoed through the locus. To reignite a dying star was a feat of cosmological engineering that the compact had only theorized about in its most ambitious simulations. It would require the energy output of a galactic core, focused with impossible precision. It was the work of gods, not of a fledgling race from a single planet. As the star's light returned to its former glory, the null field receded, like a curtain being drawn back, and the assembly in the locus of Concord saw what had been hidden behind it. Kalen's multifaceted eyes struggled to process the image. His mind, which held the memory of 10,000 years, could find no frame of reference for what he was seeing. There, arrayed in a silent, perfect formation around the Valois sun, were the human vessels, and Kalen finally understood. Vorlag's description of them as infants was so tragically, comically wrong. They were not infants, they were giants. The ships, if they could even be called ships, were behemoths that dwarfed anything the Compact had ever built. They were not sleek metallic constructs of manufactured alloys. They looked grown. Vast organic structures of a deep midnight blue, streaked with veins of what looked like living, bioluminescent light. Their forms were reminiscent of the great, deep-ocean creatures from humanity's own world, leviathans of impossible scale. They had no visible engines, no weapon ports, no view screens. They were silent, majestic, and ancient. They looked less like machines and more like a migration of celestial beings, their surfaces scarred and pitted not from battle, but from eons of traversing the unimaginable void between stars. Earth's giants had taken flight, and the galaxy would never be the same. A single, smaller vessel detached from one of the giants and moved toward the assembled compact fleet, its movements fluid and graceful. It broadcast a standard, peaceful hailing frequency. In the locus, the tension was so thick it was almost solid. General Vorlag was frozen, his usually impassive form betraying utter shock. After a long moment, the high speaker found his voice. "Open a channel." The main view screen in the locus shifted. The image was of a simple, clean room bathed in soft, white light. Seated at a plain table was a single human female. She was older, her dark hair streaked with gray, her face lined with what seemed not like age, but with a profound, quiet weariness. She wore a simple dark blue uniform, unadorned with rank or insignia. When she spoke, her voice was calm, measured, and carried a weight that resonated deeper than the formal pronouncements of any speaker. "This is Ambassador Eva Rostova of the Terran Coalition," she said, her eyes meeting the gazes of the assembled delegates without a trace of arrogance or fear. "We received your message of distress regarding the Valois system. We have stabilized the star. The phenomenon you call the Blight has been neutralized in this sector. The Valois people are safe." The sheer, understated power of her statement stunned the locus into silence. She spoke of rekindling a sun as if it were a minor repair. Vorlag, finally regaining his composure, stepped forward. "Ambassador Rostova, what are those vessels? What is this technology? Our records of your civilization show nothing of this capability." Eva Rostova offered a small, sad smile. "Your records are not wrong, General Vorlag. The technology you see is not of our own invention. It is an inheritance." She gestured to the room around her. "We are a young species, it is true, but our planet is old, and we were not the first of its children to look to the stars." Kalen felt a tremor run through his form. An inheritance? What could she mean? "Our history, as you have no doubt observed, is one of conflict," the human ambassador continued, her voice taking on a more somber tone. "We fought over land, over resources, over beliefs. We nearly destroyed ourselves and our world a dozen times over. In our darkest hour, on the verge of a final, self-inflicted extinction, we found something. Buried deep beneath our ice caps, slumbering for a time beyond our comprehension, we found them. The giants." She paused, letting the word hang in the air. "They were not ships, they were beings, the first intelligence to arise on our world eons before us, a biomechan. Eichel spacefaring species that had achieved a perfect symbiosis with their planet. They had foreseen a planetary cataclysm, the one that wiped out our own reptilian ancestors, and had built these orcs, not to escape but to endure. They entered a state of hibernation deep within the planet's mantle, waiting for the world to heal. They did not expect a second intelligent species to arise in their absence." The revelation was staggering. The Galactic History Archives held no record of such a species. They had been hidden, dormant, on one of the most chaotic and insignificant worlds in the known galaxy. "When we found them," Eva said, her eyes distant with memory, "they were dying. Their long slumber had taken its toll, but in their final moments they communicated with us. They shared their knowledge, their history, their purpose, and they gave us their bodies, these vessels, as a gift, an inheritance. They asked only one thing of us in return, that we use their legacy to do what they no longer could, to act as shepherds, to protect life wherever we found it." She looked directly at Kalen, her gaze piercing. "The Cathar believe in the sanctity of memory. You will understand this. We became the living memory of a species far greater than our own. We spent the last of our centuries not building weapons, but learning to commune with these biomechanical giants, to understand their systems, to become their new consciousness. We unified not through conquest, but through a shared, sacred purpose. The conflicts you observed were the last, dying echoes of our old selves. We had found a reason to be better. The truth was so much larger, so much more profound than anything they had imagined. Humanity's power was not their own. It was a borrowed strength, a sacred trust. They were not conquerors, they were custodians. Their sudden leap in capability was not the result of a secret technological breakthrough, but of a spiritual and philosophical transformation. "The blight," Kalen said, his voice a reverent whisper. "How did you stop it?" "The giants were not built for war," Eva explained. "They are fundamentally creators, not destroyers. They are world movers, terraformers, stellar nurseries. The blight is a form of cosmic entropy, a negative energy field that accelerates the decay of complex systems. You tried to fight it with force, with energy. That is like trying to fight a shadow with a sword. It only feeds it. The giants did not fight it. They simply healed the damage it caused. They poured pure, creative life force back into the star, restoring its balance. The blight cannot consume that which is whole and healthy. It preys on the weak, the dying. We made the star strong again." General Vorlag took a step back, his entire posture transformed from arrogance to awe. He looked from the calm human on the screen to the image of the majestic, living ships hanging in space. You could have conquered the galaxy," he stammered, the thought an involuntary admission of his own martial worldview. "With this power, you could have subjugated us all." Eva Rostova's expression was one of infinite pity. "To what end, General? To repeat the same mistakes we made on our own world, only on a galactic scale, to prove ourselves the strongest tribe in a slightly larger valley. We have outgrown such ambitions. The gift of the giants was not just their bodies, but their perspective. They lived for millions of years. They thought in terms of eons. They taught us that the only legacy worth leaving is not one of empire, but of preservation. The universe is full of wonders. Our purpose is not to own them, but to ensure they endure." A deep, profound shame washed over Kalen as he thought of their own petty squabbles in the locus, their talk of quarantines and acceptable losses. While they were drawing lines on a map to sacrifice their own people, humanity was crossing the void to heal a star, motivated by a promise made to a dead species. They had underestimated humanity on every conceivable level. They had judged their technology, their politics, their lifespans, but they had never once considered the depth of their character. "We are in your debt, Ambassador," Kalen said, inclining his crystalline form in a gesture of the deepest Cathar respect. "The Compact owes you a debt that can never be repaid. You came when we believed all hope was lost, when we thought no one would come." "There is no debt," Eva replied simply. "It is our duty. We were fortunate that the Valois system was within our operational range. The giants are powerful, but they are not infinite. Their journeys are long and require immense energy." This practical limitation was almost a relief. It made the humans, for all their awesome power, seem less like gods and more like what they were, mortals, burdened with a purpose far larger than themselves. It was in that moment that a new unity began to form in the locus, a bond forged not of fear or mutual interest, but genuine, humbling respect. The old hierarchies, the ancient prejudices, all seemed to melt away in the face of what humanity had become. The Xylos warrior, the Cygnus philosopher, the Cathar historian, all of them were united in their awe. They had been so certain of their own wisdom, their own place at the apex of galactic civilization. Now they saw that they were the infants, and they had just met the adults. The work to restore the blighted sectors began in earnest. Humanity, in concert with the Compact, established a joint command. The humans provided the unique capabilities of the giants, while the Compact's vast resources and fleets provided logistical support, scientific analysis, and protection. It was a new age for the galaxy, an age of true cooperation. Kalen worked closely with Ambassador Rostova, and in their long conversations, he came to understand the soul of this new humanity. He learned of their art, their music, their sorrow, and their boundless, terrifying capacity for hope. He learned that their calmness was not a lack of emotion, but a mastery of it, a discipline born from centuries of staring into the face of their own self-made annihilation. They were not gods. They were survivors, and they bore their scars with a quiet dignity that was more impressive than any display of power. It was during one of these sessions, months after the Valois miracle, that the final, most profound revelation came. They were in a quiet observation lounge aboard one of the giants, a vast, cavernous space that felt more like a cathedral than a starship. The walls were a living membrane, showing the starscape outside not as a screen, but as a direct, unfiltered view. Kalen and Eva were reviewing the compact's historical archives, cross-referencing them with the data inherited from the original giants. "The blight is not a natural phenomenon," Eva said, her finger tracing a complex energy pattern on a holographic display. "We are certain of it now. It is artificial, a weapon or more accurately a tool." Kalen felt a familiar chill. A tool for what purpose? "We are not sure," Eva admitted, "but the giants that came before us had a word for it. In their language, it roughly translates to the harrowing." They believed it was a cyclical event, a recurring filter designed to prune the galaxy of burgeoning spacefaring life. A great filter, Kalen breathed, the ancient philosophical concept suddenly becoming terrifyingly real. But who would create such a thing, and why? Eva's gaze turned from the star chart to the deep, empty blackness between the galaxies. That is the question they spent their entire existence trying to answer. They never found the source, but they did find an echo, a message. She manipulated the display. A new waveform appeared, ancient and heavily degraded. It was not a language, it was pure mathematics, a signal of such fundamental complexity that it could only be artificial. "This signal does not originate from our galaxy," she said softly. "It comes from the void, from the vast, dark ocean between the island universes. The giants detected it just before they entered their hibernation. It is a warning, broadcast across all realities, on all possible frequencies." She translated a portion of the message, the equations resolving into simple, chilling concepts on the screen. "They are coming. Silence the void. Build shelters, not ships. Do not reach. Do not answer. The harvest is coming." Kalen stared at the words, the blood-chilling simplicity of the warning. The harrowing, the harvest. The blight was not the enemy. It was just the tool used to clear the field. It was the fire used to burn the forest before the true threat arrived. "They are coming?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "We do not know who they are," Eva said, her face grim, the weight of her inherited burden etched upon it. "The signal is older than our galaxy, perhaps older than the universe as we know it, but the giants believed it. They did not build their arcs to escape a dying sun. They built them to survive the harvest, to hide from the reapers of the void. Their purpose was not to travel the stars, but to burrow deep into the bedrock of a world and wait for the storm to pass." A silence descended upon the chamber, heavier and more profound than any Kalen had ever experienced. The scale of his reality had just been shattered. Their galactic crisis, the blight that had threatened to extinguish a dozen civilizations, was nothing. It was a prelude, a minor symptom of a cosmic disease so vast and so ancient that it defied comprehension. He looked at Eva, at this representative of a species they had dismissed as primitive, and he finally understood the true nature of their burden. Humanity had not just inherited a fleet of magnificent starships. They had inherited a warning from the dawn of time. They had become the custodians of the most terrible secret in the universe. "Your people," Kalen began, his in reeling. "You chose to take flight. The warning said to build shelters, not ships, to hide. You did the opposite." Eva's gaze was unflinching, filled with a resolve that seemed to defy the very heat-death of the universe. "The giants who came before us chose to hide, and they died alone in the dark. Their legacy would have been dust if we had not found them. My people have made many mistakes. We are violent and foolish and short-sighted. But we have learned one thing from our endless, bloody history. You cannot hide from the darkness. Hiding is just a slower way of dying. The only way to survive is to stand together, to hold the line, and to keep the lights on, no matter how deep the night becomes." She turned her gaze back to the stardusted void. "They thought no one would come for them, the Valois, and in a way they were right. We didn't come for them, we came for everyone. The blight was our first test. It was a chance to see if the promise we made was one we could keep. It was a chance to see if the fractious, broken children of Earth could finally unite the galaxy into a family, a true civilization strong enough to face the coming dark." Kalen looked out from the great living ship, past the rekindled sun of the Valois, past the fleets of the now humbled but unified Galactic Compact, and into the profound, endless black. He saw it now not as an empty space, but as a waiting one. The fear was still there, a cold, hard knot in the center of his being. But it was overshadowed by something else, something new and fiercely bright. It was the same audacious, impossible hope he had seen in the etching on that tiny, ancient human probe. The humans were not just the galaxy's inheritors, they were its shepherds. They were not just survivors, they were its guardians. They were the giants who had taken flight not to conquer the sky, but to hold it up. And as the real, ancient night began to fall, their watch was only just beginning.